Forget Captain Jack Sparrow. Forget the walking the plank, the buried treasure maps, the lovable rogues in tricorn hats. The real pirates of the Caribbean were something far more complex, far more dangerous, and far more fascinating than Hollywood has ever dared to show you. They were men and women from the absolute margins of society who built a parallel world at sea. They were ruthless criminals who had their own democratic constitutions. They were escaped slaves and displaced sailors who built multiracial crews in a racially stratified world. They were, for about 40 years, the most feared force on the Atlantic Ocean. This is the real history of Caribbean pirates, the facts behind the legends. Part 1. Why the Caribbean became the pirate capital of the world. To understand why piracy exploded in the Caribbean, you need to understand what the Caribbean was in the 17th and 18th centuries, the most commercially valuable region on Earth. Hundreds of merchant ships moved through these waters every year, laden with sugar, rum, tobacco, indigo, silver, gold, and slaves. Spanish treasure fleets carrying the plunder of South American civilizations passed through on their way to European ports. This was, quite simply, the richest shipping lane in the world, and it was patrolled by colonial navies that were stretched thin across vast distances. The Caribbean also offered geography ideal for piracy. Thousands of islands, hidden bays, shallow coastal waters inaccessible to large naval vessels, and friendly local populations in certain ports who were happy to trade with anyone willing to pay. Nassau in the Bahamas became the nerve center of the pirate world, a lawless harbor that historians have called the Republic of Pirates, home at various times to Benjamin Hornigold, Charles Vane, Calico Jack Rackham, Black Sam Bellamy, and the most notorious pirate name in history, Blackbeard. It is also important to understand the distinction between privateers and pirates. Privateers operated under government licenses, called letters of marque, that legally authorized them to attack enemy ships during wartime. Henry Morgan, the legendary Welsh buccaneer, operated largely as a privateer for the English crown, raiding Spanish cities like Portobello and Panama with official backing. When the wars ended and the letters of marque expired, many of these men simply kept doing what they knew, and became pirates. The line between legal and illegal in the 17th century Caribbean was drawn in pencil, not ink. Part 2. Blackbeard, the most terrifying name in piracy. Edward Teach, known universally as Blackbeard, was born in Bristol, England, around 1680. He arrived in the Caribbean as a sailor during the War of the Spanish Succession and transitioned to piracy under the mentorship of privateer Benjamin Hornigold. By 1717, Blackbeard had captured a French slave ship, fitted it with 40 cannons, and renamed it Queen Anne's Revenge. It became one of the most powerful pirate vessels in the Atlantic. Blackbeard understood something most pirates did not, that reputation was a weapon more powerful than any cannon. He cultivated the most terrifying image he could manage. He was reportedly a physically enormous man. He braided his massive black beard and twisted the braids with ribbon. Before battle, he reportedly stuck slow-burning fuses, lighted match cord, under his hat, so that during combat his face was wreathed in acrid smoke and sparks. Witnesses described the sight as resembling a devil emerging from hell. He carried multiple pistols and bandoliers across his chest and wore a great coat regardless of the heat. His most audacious act was the blockade of Charleston, South Carolina in 1718, a major colonial port. He effectively held an entire city hostage with his fleet, refusing to let ships in or out until a ransom of medical supplies was paid. The fact that he succeeded is extraordinary. But in November 1718, Virginia's colonial governor dispatched Royal Navy Lieutenant Robert Maynard to hunt him down. The two met at Ocracoke Island, North Carolina, in a brutal hand-to-hand battle. Blackbeard reportedly took 5 bullet wounds and over 20 sword cuts before he finally fell. His severed head was hung from Maynard's bowsprit as a trophy. His pirating career had lasted less than 2 years. His legend has lasted 3 centuries. Part 3. Bartholomew Roberts, the most successful pirate of all time. If Blackbeard was the most infamous pirate in history, Bartholomew Roberts, known as Black Bart, was unquestionably the most successful. Born John Roberts in Wales in 1682, he had never wanted to be a pirate. In 1719, he was second mate on a slave ship called the Princess when she was captured by the pirate Howell Davis off the coast of West Africa. Roberts was pressed into the crew. Within 6 weeks, Davis had been killed in an ambush, and the crew, impressed by Roberts's navigation skills, intelligence, and composure, elected him captain. What followed is one of the most astonishing careers in the history of piracy. Bartholomew Roberts captured over 400 ships in just 3 years between 1719 and 1722. 400 ships. His contemporary Blackbeard's entire career produced a fraction of that. He raided across the entire Atlantic, the Caribbean, North America, Brazil, Newfoundland, where he took 22 merchant ships and 150 fishing boats in a single harbor raid, and the West African coast. At his peak, his fleet commanded the 42-gun Royal Fortune and struck such terror that coastal trade in the West Indies virtually ceased. Local merchants treated him as an unstoppable force. Some regarded him as a folk hero. Roberts was also one of the most fascinating personalities in pirate history. He refused to sail on Sundays. He did not permit gambling on his ships. He maintained a code of conduct, written articles that every crew member signed, that included democratic voting on major decisions, guaranteed shares of plunder for each crew member, and compensation for injuries sustained in battle. His crew was genuinely multiracial, as were many pirate ships of the era. Researchers estimate that approximately 30% of the 5,000 or more active pirates between 1715 and 1725 were of African heritage, many of them formerly enslaved people who had found in piracy a form of freedom unavailable to them anywhere else. Roberts met his end in February 1722 when a Royal Navy vessel commanded by Chaloner Ogle caught him off the West African coast. He was killed by grapeshot to the throat in the first broadside, standing on his own deck. His crew honored his standing order and buried him at sea before surrendering. His body was never recovered. Part 4. And Bonnie, Mary Red and Calico Jack. The golden age of piracy produced one of history's most extraordinary stories of women at sea. And Bonnie was born in Ireland around 1698, emigrated to the Carolinas, and by her early 20s had abandoned her first husband to join the crew of John Rackham, known as Calico Jack for his love of brightly colored calico clothing. Rackham was a pirate operating out of Nassau, Bahamas, with a reputation more colorful than his seamanship was formidable. On Rackham's ship, the William, and Bonnie fought alongside a second woman, Mary Read, who had spent much of her life disguised as a man, serving first in the British military and then at sea. Both women were, by all historical accounts, far more effective fighters than most of the men on the crew. When the William was captured by a Royal Navy sloop in October 1720, the men were reportedly too drunk below decks to defend the ship effectively. Bonnie and Read fought on above deck, reportedly shouting at their male crewmates to come up and fight. All three were captured. Calico Jack was hanged in Jamaica in November 1720. Both women avoided immediate execution by claiming pregnancy. Mary Red died in prison, likely from fever. And Bonnie's ultimate fate remains historically unclear. She simply disappears from the record, one of history's most tantalizing mysteries. Part 5. The End of the Golden Age and the Legend That Survived. The Golden Age of piracy ended not with a single dramatic event but with a sustained campaign of suppression. In 1717, the British Crown offered a general pardon to any pirate who surrendered. Some accepted, many did not. Governor Woodes Rogers arrived in Nassau in 1718 with a Royal Navy fleet and turned the Republic of Pirates into a functioning British colony practically overnight. Hanging pirates publicly, chasing those who fled, and using former pirates as informants, Rogers broke the back of Caribbean piracy within a few years. The deaths of Bartholomew Roberts in 1722 and several other major pirate captains in the following years effectively ended the era. But the mythology proved indestructible. A 1724 book called A General History of the Pirates by the pseudonymous Captain Charles Johnson, now believed to have been written by Daniel Defoe or a contemporary, created the pirate archetype that has dominated the popular imagination ever since. Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island in 1883 added buried treasure, maps marked with X's, and the immortal Long John Silver. J.M. Barrie's Captain Hook followed. And eventually, Jack Sparrow. Most of the most beloved pirate clichés, walking the plank, the parrot on the shoulder, the buried treasure chest, are entirely fictional inventions of the literary tradition, not historical reality. The reality was both darker and more interesting. Real Caribbean pirates were mostly poor men escaping desperate circumstances. They built communities of outcasts, including formerly enslaved people, that operated on principles of democratic equality more radical than any European government of the era. They were violent criminals who nevertheless created a counterculture that challenged the slave-trading, empire-building world that had produced them. Their story is not a simple one. It never was. The Caribbean pirates were real. Their ships were real. Their violence was real. And so was the desperate freedom they were chasing, in a world that had decided people like them were worth nothing. From Blackbeard's burning beard to Black Bart's 400 ships, from Anbani's courage to the multiracial crews who sailed under the black flag, the real pirates of the Caribbean are more complex, more human, and more extraordinary than any movie has ever shown you. The legend was always smaller than the truth.